Hi everyone, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Nancy, and in today's tutorial we are going to be learning how to make this flare skirt with a drawstring design. So this fabric was gifted to me by one of my subscribers, and I want to use this medium to say thank you very much. The name of the fabric is called a crepe fabric, and I made use of 2.5 yards. For a plus size person, you should make use of 3 yards. So I'll be making some calculations here, and the reason is because I don't want any joining to be attached to the bottom of this flare skirt like the regular flare skirts we see. So most of the time the joining doesn't really look nice, especially if the fabric is a plain fabric without patterns. So to avoid this joining, there are some calculations we need to take so we can know the exact amount of fabric we need for both the front piece of the skirt and the back piece of the skirt. The first calculation is to get my waist radius. So to get the waist radius, I'll divide my waist circumference, which is 26 inches, by 3.142. So take note that 3.142 is a constant. So after the division, my waist radius is equal to 8.3 inches. The next step is to write out your desired skirt length. I want my skirt length to be 30 inches. Now, to know the width of the material you need for the front piece of the skirt, you add the waist radius, which is 8.3, plus your skirt length, and that is 38.3 inches. So this is the width of my fabric. I placed the starting of the tape from this edge, and when I got to 38.3 inches, I added extra 3 inches to that to be on the safer side, because I don't want to add any fabric to the bottom of the skirt to avoid joining. Now I went ahead to notch this point to cut out the front piece of my skirt. So this is for the front piece of the skirt. To get the amount of fabric I'll be using for the back piece of the skirt, I'll duplicate the front piece. Now altogether from here, I have it to be 41.3 inches. Now I went ahead to pick up the actual fabric to cut out a width of 41.3 inches. So this fabric here is for the back piece. Now I'll cut it out. So for clarity's sake, the width of this fabric for both the front piece and the back piece of this skirt is the same. Now I'll pick up one of the pieces to use this as the front piece of my skirt. So this is the width side of this fabric, and you can see that I would adjust it this way. Now I'll use my fingers to hold the top of the fabric here, and then use my hand to adjust the other side to fold this fabric into two in form of a triangular shape. So naturally, working with a crepe fabric can be this stressful, but the fact that it is even more stressful to me right now is because I'm trying to make sure that the camera captures the size of this fabric that is on fold. So from the calculation I made here, the radius of my waist circumference is 8.3 inches. I placed the tape from the top of the triangle to mark 8.3 inches all through. Now I connected all dots together. So this new line is the waist circumference for the front piece of the skirt. The next step is to mark the full length of the skirt. The full length of my skirt is 30 inches. And because I'll be attaching a waistband of 2 inches, I subtracted 2 inches from the top of the waistline. So my desired length is 30 inches. I added extra 1 inch in allowance to the bottom, which made it 31 inches altogether. Now, from the top of my waistline, I would keep placing it on 2 inches to mark the length as 31 inches. The next step is to connect the dotted points together. Now, before cutting out the waistline, I added half-inch sewing allowance to the top of the waistline and went ahead to trim it out. The next step is to cut out the bottom of the skirt following the direction of the chalk. So let me remind you of something here. I raised the other side of the fabric and you would notice that one side of the fabric is shorter than the other side. But this won't affect the measurements of my skirt because of the initial calculation I did from the beginning. So make sure to take the calculation serious. So you don't have to start joining extra fabric to the bottom of your own skirt. Alright guys, so this is the front piece of my skirt. So this is the fabric that was cut out for the back piece. Remember, it's a duplicate of the front piece. Now from this top, I held it to my finger to fold the fabric into two to form a triangular shape, just exactly as I did for the front piece of the skirt. The only difference between the front piece and the back piece of the skirt right now is that there will be a zipper at the center of the back piece. So now I would place the front piece of the skirt directly on this folded fabric, making sure that I left a distance of 1 inch from the center fold, which will be for the zipper allowance on the center back of the back piece of the skirt. Now the next step is to trim out the waistline of the back piece of the skirt and to also trim out the bottom of the skirt. Now I went ahead to open the zipper allowance, which is on the center fold of the back piece. Now from the center fold of this back piece, I placed my tape from the waistline to mark a length of 6 inches, which would be the opening for the zipper. Then from this point I marked 6 inches. I made a straight stitch vertically downwards to the hem of the skirt. After stitching, this is how it should be. So you can see the opening here for the zipper. Alright, I'll keep the back piece aside. So this is the front piece of the skirt, which is folded into two. The next step is on how to make the drawstring. I went ahead to notch the center of the waistline. Then I opened this up. Now from the center of the waistline, I would place my tape from that point to one end of the waistline. Now I folded the tape into two to mark the midpoint. Now I went ahead to spread out this front piece properly. Then from this midpoint I chalked. I would roll a straight line vertically downwards to about 10 inches. Now I kept the front piece aside. So the next step is to make the casing for the drawstring. So this is the little piece I'll be using to make the casing for the drawstring. The length of this piece is 12 inches, while the width is 3 inches. Now I flipped the piece to the wrong side of the fabric to fold this edge half inch in and further fold it in by half inch. After you folded this end of the strap, the next step is to take this piece to the ironing board to iron this edge by half inch and to also iron this other edge by half inch. The edges have been folded by half inch. Now I folded this strap into two equally, then took this to the ironing board to iron the strap. So this would form a center line. After ironing, I open the strap and obviously you can see the center line here. So the drawstring casing is ready and the next step is to attach it to the front piece of the skirt. Now to attach this, looking at the drawstring casing, you notice that this edge was sewn while the top part was not sewn. So this top part is going to be on the waistline and the center of the strap will be placed directly on the line I chalked. Once this has been placed properly, the next step is to pin the edges of the straps to the front piece of the skirt. After pinning, I'll take this to the sewing machine to stitch the edges on this side and to also stitch the edges on this side. And the last stitches I will do would be on the center line. So the edges of the casing has been stitched and the center of the casing has been stitched. So the center stitched made us to have two holes at the bottom of the casing and two holes at the top of the casing where the straps would be inserted into. Now for the straps, the width of the strap is 1.5 inches, while the length of the strap is 26 inches. At the top of the strap, I would fold it in by ½ inch and fold the edges by ½ inch as well. Then I'll go ahead to fold it again into two equally. Now I took this to my sewing machine to stitch the edges and I also did the same for the second strap as well. Now the straps is ready. The next step is to use a safety pin to pin the rough end of the strap. Now I'll go ahead to insert the rough end of the strap from the bottom of the strap casing. And when I got to the waist circumference, I removed the pin. Now the next step is to insert the second strap on the second casing. Now I took the front piece to my sewing machine to stitch the strap on the waist circumference so it doesn't pull out. After stitching, I went ahead to trim out the excess strap. Alright guys, so for those of us that would like to add a pocket to it, I would fold this fabric into two and fold it into two again. So I practically folded this fabric into four. So at the end of the day, I'll be having four pieces for the pocket. Now on this side of the pocket, I marked 7 inches, which would be the pocket opening. Now I assumed I inserted my hands into the pocket. I went ahead to spread out my fingers and then to trace out the pocket. Now I connected all dots together so you can easily see the lines. The next step is to trim out the sides of the pocket. The next step is on how to attach the pockets. This is the back piece of my skirt. Now I would place my tape on the edges of the skirt to mark 2 inches from the waistline and 2 inches from the waistline on this side as well. And for the front piece of the skirt, I would also mark 2 inches from the waistline. I placed the first pocket from this point I chalked to stitch the edge by ½ inch and to also place the second pocket on this point I chalked to stitch the edge by ½ inch. On the back piece of the skirt, I placed the right side of the pocket on this point to stitch by ½ inch and to place the fourth pocket on this point to stitch by ½ inch. After stitching all the pockets, I placed the front piece of the skirt on the back piece of the skirt to pin the edges together. Then I took this to the sewing machine to stitch the edges of the skirt following the direction of the chalk by 1 inch. Now I would also stitch this other sides of the skirt by 1 inch as well. After stitching the sides of the skirt, I turned the skirt to the right side of the fabric. The next step is to make the waistband. Now I place the measuring tape on the waist of the skirt to take the entire waist circumference with the zipper allowance included. Here I have it to be 28 inches. This simply means that the width of my waistband should be 28 inches as well. While the width of the waistband is 5 inches, I went ahead to gum half side of the waistband with a gum stay, and then I folded the edges here by half inch. To attach the waistband to the waist of the skirt, I would place this side of the band without a paper stay on the wrong side of the waist circumference to stitch by half inch all through. After stitching the waistband, the next step is to fold the waistband into two equally in such a way that it covers the seam on the waistline. Then I'll take this to the sewing machine to stitch the edges of the waistband. The final step is to attach the zipper to the zipper opening and to also fold the hem of the skirt in by half inch and further fold it in by half inch all through. Alright guys, thanks for watching to the very end. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe, share and like my videos. And if you don't want to miss any of my new tutorials, please turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload new tutorials. Thank you for watching and see you in my next tutorial.